There's a moment, and I think every woman who has ever been truly, deeply betrayed knows exactly what I'm talking about, where the world goes completely, terrifyingly quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, quiet the way a house goes quiet right before a storm tears the roof off. For me, that moment happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March. I was standing in our kitchen, the kitchen I had designed myself, with the white marble countertops I'd spent 3 weekends sourcing, the brushed gold fixtures I'd saved for, holding a coffee mug with both hands, and I was reading a text message on my husband's phone that he'd accidentally left unlocked on the counter. The text was from my best friend of 11 years. It said, "Last night was everything. I love you. Don't let her ruin this." Her. That was me. I was her now. I stood there for probably 45 seconds, maybe a full minute. The coffee in my mug was still steaming. Outside, a neighbor's dog was barking at something in the street. The refrigerator hummed. And then I did something that probably seems strange given everything. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't call anyone. I very carefully put the phone back exactly where I'd found it. I topped off my coffee, and I sat down at the kitchen island and I started thinking. Because here's the thing nobody tells you about discovering a betrayal of that magnitude. The first decision you make in those 45 seconds will define everything that comes after. And I had absolutely no intention of making the wrong one. My name is Claire. I was 34 years old. I had a career I'd built from scratch, a home I loved, and what I believed was a marriage worth fighting for. This is the story of how I found out I was wrong about one of those things, and exactly what I did about it.
Let me take you back, because context matters. It always matters. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. Not the charming, postcard kind of small town people romanticize, but the kind where everyone knows your business and ambition is quietly treated like a character flaw. My parents were decent people, hardworking, but they had what I can only describe as a ceiling when it came to dreaming. They were comfortable with enough, and they raised me to be comfortable with enough too. But I never was. I left at 18 for college in Chicago, communications degree, 2 part-time jobs, student loans that made me physically nauseous every time I thought about them. By 23, I was working at a mid-sized marketing agency, and by 27, I had been promoted twice and was managing a team of 8 people. I wasn't rich, but I was building something, which felt better than rich at the time. That's where I met Daniel. God, Daniel. He walked into our agency as a client. His tech startup needed a full rebrand, and he was exactly the kind of man who fills up a room without even trying. Dark hair, easy smile, the sort of confidence that reads as charisma before you've known someone long enough to understand the difference. He asked me out 3 times before I said yes, which I thought at the time was persistence. I now understand it was practice. We dated for 2 years. He proposed in Italy, Florence, the Piazzale Michelangelo at sunset, the whole breathtaking production of it. I said yes with tears streaming down my face because I genuinely, completely, 100% believed I was the luckiest woman alive. We got married when I was 30. Small ceremony, close friends and family. Beautiful, real. Or so I thought. And then there was Mara. Mara and I had been friends since my first year in Chicago. We'd met at a yoga class of all places. She'd given me her extra hair tie after class, and we'd ended up talking for 3 hours over cheap wine at a bar down the street. She was warm, funny, fiercely loyal, and she had this quality I've always admired in people. She made you feel like the most interesting person in the room. She was my maid of honor. She gave a toast at my wedding that made everyone cry. She was the person I called when I found out my mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer. She was there in the hospital waiting room. She was my person. And I am going to be completely honest with you, because that's the only reason I'm telling this story. Looking back, there were signs. There are always signs. The way she laughed a little too easily at Daniel's jokes, the way she'd touch his arm during dinner, just briefly, just casually, just enough. The way she'd text him directly sometimes instead of going through me. Little things, practical things. Oh, just confirming the reservation time things that I absorbed and immediately rationalized and filed away under I'm being paranoid. I ignored the signs because ignoring them was easier than the alternative. I ignored them because I trusted her, because I trusted him, because I had built a life I was proud of, and believing it was real was simply easier than entertaining the possibility that the two people I loved most were systematically, deliberately dismantling it behind my back. By the time I found that text message, the affair had been going on for 2 years. 2 years of Sunday dinners where we all sat around the same table. 2 years of her holding my hand and listening to me talk about how Daniel and I were struggling to connect, how the distance between us felt strange but I couldn't name it, how sometimes I felt lonely in my own marriage in a way I couldn't fully explain. And she had nodded and soothed and told me every relationship goes through phases. 2 years. When I think about it now, there's a particular kind of anger that sits behind my sternum like a hot coal. Not the explosive, screaming kind of anger. The cold kind. The kind that clarifies everything. That's the kind of anger I had on that Tuesday morning, and I was going to use every single degree of it.
Here is what I did not do. I did not confront Daniel that night. I did not call Mara and scream at her. I did not post anything on social media. I did not call my mother or my sister or any of our mutual friends. What I did instead was go to work, sit at my desk, and think with the kind of crystalline, terrifying focus that only arrives when your entire world has just been quietly detonated. I thought about what I knew versus what I could prove. One text message is not a case. One text message is deniable. One text message and Daniel would cry and apologize and swear it was nothing, and Mara would do the same, and I would be standing there looking unhinged and paranoid with nothing concrete in my hands. I needed more. And so, God help me, I became someone I had never been before. I became methodical. Over the next 3 weeks, I gathered information the way a detective gathers evidence, quietly, carefully, with no visible change in my behavior whatsoever. I kept going to dinner with them. I kept laughing at the right moments. I kept being Claire, warm, trusting, slightly distracted by work, nothing to see here. Meanwhile, I hired a private investigator. I know how that sounds. I want you to understand, I am not a dramatic person by nature. I have never been someone who operates in extremes. But I had been living inside a lie for 2 years without knowing it, and I needed the full shape of that lie before I decided what to do with it. His name was Robert, the investigator, a former cop, quiet, efficient, absolutely zero judgment in his voice when I explained the situation. He charged me $2,800 for 3 weeks of documentation. I paid it from a personal account Daniel didn't have visibility into, a small account I'd been quietly maintaining for 4 years, ever since a conversation early in our marriage where Daniel had made a joke about our money that had landed slightly wrong, and I'd filed the feeling away without examining it too closely. I had, apparently, been preparing for this without knowing it. Within 10 days, Robert had photographs, meeting locations, a hotel near Daniel's office, Mara's apartment, twice a restaurant 2 neighborhoods over where no one they knew was likely to go. He had timestamps. He had documentation of 47 separate communications between their personal phones in a 6-week window. The full picture was worse than I'd imagined, and somehow, at the same time, exactly as bad as I'd known it would be. I sat with that folder for an entire weekend. I did not open it on Friday night. I made myself dinner, watched 2 episodes of a documentary about ocean ecosystems, and went to sleep at a reasonable hour. I opened it on Saturday morning with coffee, and I read through everything slowly, and I let myself feel every single thing there was to feel. Grief and rage and humiliation and a sorrow so profound it felt almost physical, like something being pulled out of my chest. And then, on Sunday morning, I closed the folder, put it in my bag, and called my attorney.
This is where I need to give you a piece of advice that I genuinely wish someone had given me years earlier. Always, always, always have your own attorney. Not a shared attorney, not a friend's recommendation that your spouse also knows. Your attorney. A good one, someone with no loyalties except for you. I had been referred to mine, let's call her Patricia, 2 years earlier by a colleague, completely unrelated to anything personal. I'd used her for a business contract review. I trusted her. I called her on Sunday morning, told her I needed an appointment on Monday, and didn't elaborate beyond, I believe I need to begin divorce proceedings. Patricia was extraordinary. Within our first meeting, she had outlined every protection I needed, identified every financial entanglement that required attention, and, crucially, told me something that changed my entire strategy. Claire, you're in a state where documented infidelity has bearing on asset division. If you leave this marriage with proof of what you've shown me, documented over a sustained period, you are in a significantly stronger position than if you simply file for irreconcilable differences tomorrow. How much stronger? I asked. She told me. I said, how long do we need? She said, 6 to 8 weeks of clean, continued documentation. Don't change your behavior, don't move money, don't discuss this with anyone who could be subpoenaed or who might warn him. I nodded. I can do that, I said, and I meant it in a way that was true from exactly the right angle. We were in week 7 then. I called Patricia the next morning. I'm ready, I said. Everything's in order, she said, whenever you want to move. I chose a Thursday. I chose it deliberately. Not a Friday, which felt too dramatic, not a Monday, which felt too businesslike. Thursday felt like a day I could control.
I want to be clear about something before I tell you how this unfolded. What I did was not revenge in the way movies portray revenge. I didn't slash tires, I didn't post exposés on Instagram, I didn't show up at Mara's apartment with a camera crew. What I did was colder, quieter, and considerably more effective than any of that. On Thursday morning, I woke up before Daniel, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen island one last time. I looked around that kitchen, my marble countertops, my brushed gold fixtures, the hanging pendant lights I debated for 3 weeks, and I felt something settle in my chest, like a decision clicking into place. Then I called Robert, my investigator, and asked him to send the final documentation package directly to Patricia's office, time-stamped and notarized. Then I called Mara's employer. This requires some explanation. Mara worked at the same company as Daniel. Different departments. She was in product development, he was in business development, which is, by the way, how this had been so easy for them for so long. They had legitimate professional reasons to communicate, to meet, to travel occasionally for work. What they did not have was a legitimate professional reason for the particular communications Robert had documented between their work accounts. That was the part they'd been less careful about. People always think their personal phones are the vulnerability. They forget about corporate servers. I did not call Mara's employer to get her fired. I want to be precise about this because the distinction matters to me. I called HR to report that there appeared to be a conflict of interest between 2 employees involving undisclosed personal involvement, which was against their company policy and which was documented in communications through company servers. I gave them enough to open an inquiry. What happened from there was entirely up to them. What happened, as it turned out, was significant. Both of them were placed on administrative review. Both were required to disclose the relationship. Both faced formal consequences for the policy violations. But that's getting slightly ahead. On Thursday afternoon, Daniel came home at 6 o'clock to find me sitting in the living room. I was dressed well, I had a glass of wine, Patricia was on speakerphone. He stood in the doorway looking confused, and then, as his eyes moved to the folder on the coffee table, Robert's folder, or rather a curated selection of its contents, I watched his face do something I had never seen it do before. It went completely, utterly blank, like a screen going dark. "Patricia," I said into the phone, "he's home. Let's proceed." I will not give you a full transcript of what followed, because honestly, it was less dramatic than you might expect. There was no screaming. Patricia explained the situation with precise professional calm. I sat with my wine and said very little. Daniel tried several things in sequence.
Denial, then partial admission framed as minimization, then a pivot to emotion, then an attempt to negotiate. Patricia was unmoved by all of it. The terms I was seeking were clear, documented, and, given the evidence, extremely well positioned. Daniel could contest them, Patricia explained, but contesting them would require going to court, and going to court would require the full documentation becoming a part of the public record, including the company server communications, which at that point were already under internal review. Daniel is a man who cares very much about his professional reputation. He did not contest. I was out of that house within 3 weeks and into a rental I had already identified. The settlement gave me a clean financial foundation. The house, my house, the one I'd designed, I didn't fight for it. I didn't want to live in it anymore. It was full of performances I'd given, and I needed to be somewhere that was only mine. Now, about Mara. I did not call her, not once. Not during the 6 weeks, not on Thursday, not after. She called me 47 times over the following 2 weeks. She texted paragraphs I did not read past the first sentence. She showed up at my rental once. I saw her car out front from a window, and I did not go to the door. There was nothing to say. Every version of that conversation would have given her something, an argument to engage with, an emotion to respond to, a role in my story going forward. I chose to give her nothing. Silence, I have learned, is a form of consequence that lands harder than most. The HR inquiry at their company concluded 3 weeks after my Thursday conversation with Daniel. Mara was formally reassigned to a different division. Daniel was issued a written warning and removed from a promotion track he'd been on for 2 years. The relationship, which had apparently continued under the assumption that I simply wouldn't do anything, became the subject of exactly the kind of professional scrutiny that relationships conducted on company servers tend to attract. Within 4 months, from what I understand, through mutual friends I still had, they had broken up. Because here's the thing about affairs. They exist inside a fantasy. The fantasy requires secrecy and contrast. The contrast between the messy reality of the primary relationship and the curated, stolen, exciting moments of the hidden one. Take away the secrecy. Make the hidden thing the actual thing. Make it survive Monday mornings and HR reviews and the loss of a promotion and mutual friends choosing sides, and the slow, unglamorous reality of being 2 people who destroyed someone else together and now have to look at each other knowing it. It doesn't survive. It almost never does. In the months that followed, I did something I had been quietly planning during those 6 weeks of waiting. I had been a marketing executive for someone else's vision for 11 years. I had been building Daniel's reputation, Mara's social circle, our life. I took the settlement funds, I took my decade of experience, and I opened my own boutique agency. 3 women I trusted from my previous firm came with me. We were profitable within 8 months. I'm telling you this not because the money is the point. It isn't. But because there's something I need to say that I think is the most important part of this entire story. The best revenge is not what you do to them. It is what you build for yourself in the space that opens up when they're gone. The anger, the strategy, the careful documentation, all of that was necessary. I don't regret any of it. I was protecting myself, and I would do it again. But it was never the point. It was clearing the ground. The building was the point. It always was.
I'm recording this about 14 months after that Tuesday morning in March, the morning with the coffee mug and the quiet that wasn't peaceful. I want to tell you what my life looks like now, not to perform happiness at you, but because I think it matters. I live in a bright apartment with big windows that I chose entirely by myself, based entirely on what I wanted. I have a business I'm proud of. I have friendships, real ones, earned ones that have been tested in small ways and proven themselves solid. I am not completely healed from what happened. I want to be honest about that. There are still moments, usually late at night or very early in the morning, when I feel the shape of the loss. Not the marriage, but the version of my life I believed I was living. The version where I was loved the way I thought I was loved. You don't get completely over that. You just get to a place where it doesn't define you anymore. What I learned, what I want to leave you with, is this. The moment it all went quiet in that kitchen, the moment I had a choice about what kind of woman I was going to be in response to what had been done to me, I chose strategy over chaos. That choice gave me everything. I did not give them the satisfaction of my collapse. I did not hand them the narrative. I did not become the scorned, screaming, unraveling woman that would have made it easier for everyone to dismiss what they had done. I became, instead, someone who thought clearly and moved carefully and built something that had absolutely nothing to do with them. If you are standing in a kitchen somewhere right now, holding something you weren't supposed to see, the world gone quiet around you, take a breath, think first, and then decide what you're going to build. That's my story. I'm Claire, and if this resonated with you, if you've been through something that echoes any part of what I described today, I want to hear from you. Drop your story in the comments. Not because I can fix anything, but because sometimes the most powerful thing is knowing you're not standing in that kitchen alone. If this helped you, subscribe. I'm going to be sharing more. And hit that notification bell because trust me, the next one is even more unbelievable. Thank you for being here. Take care of yourselves.